The Fringe Radio Show covers anything related to ghosts, paranormal conspiracies, UFOs, alien and alien abductions, science and science fiction, cryptozoology, afterlife, near-death experiences, historical events and conspiracies, plus so much more. Anything shrouded in just a little bit of mystery. You can find Fringe Radio on the World Wide Web at fringeradioshow.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter as well. If you have a story, sighting, experience, or if you've got questions for our guests, go to the contact page, send us an email, and we'll make sure that we get back to you. I think for the next couple hours you are going to be very amazed with this. Our second guest tonight, which we are so glad we could put this interview together pretty quickly, is Jon Sumple. Jon left the corporate world after 24 years, and over the past 5 years he's created a TV pilot about sustainable living, helped launch a game-changing startup on a mission to make the world a better place, and created J3 Films with his partners Jack and Jamie to present stories that encourage audiences to ask questions and challenge conventional wisdom. The award-winning Extraordinary, the Stan Romanek story, is his first long-form documentary film. We're going to go ahead and bring Jon on. We're going to talk about him and his work and Stan, and I think we're going to learn a lot tonight. Jon, good evening. Uh-oh. I think I just dumped him accidentally. Jon, are you there? Hold on one second. Let's see if we get Jon to call back. I think because I'm not doing the show 6 nights a week anymore, the spirits of KTKK Radio here, the paranormal things here in the studio, the ghosts and gremlins of the board are getting me. So hopefully we'll get Jon back in just a second. The overview of the film is Stan Romanek claims to be at the center of the world's most documented extraterrestrial contact story, and the multitude of evidence accumulated over the past decade has convinced thousands around the world of his story is true. The documentary film Extraordinary, the Stan Romanek story, takes audiences on a journey to help through Stan's past. Let's see if we got Jon. Jon, do we got you this time?
Yeah, I heard everything, and then you said I'm going to click over, and then it clicked, and I heard nothing.
Man, I'm sorry. It's been a long day today. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Really good. Jon, I read your bio. We didn't even scratch the surface, but how did you get into filmmaking? How did you get into doing what you're doing? If you could give us a little bit of the backstory.
Yeah, I think it goes back to when I was a little kid, probably the whole idea of creating stories and storytelling and visual stories. Big movie buff when I was a little kid, big Steven Spielberg fan way back in the day, going all the way back to Sugarland Express and the TV movie they did, Duel. So it was that whole idea of someday getting into the film world, and I always wanted to do that. And I was in corporate marketing, senior executive for many years, and during that period of time I had a chance to work on some small corporate video projects, and the company that I worked for used to do a holiday video every year. It was a fun half-hour thing, and I got involved with that, and I did it every year for about 12, 13 years, and really got deeper and deeper into it every year that I did it and learned more and more. So self-taught in everything that I've done over the years, and just got to a point where I was looking for projects to do that would give me an opportunity to do something bigger. So the first project was back in the late 90s, came up with a television show concept for hauntings, which was very similar to Most Haunted, the show that kind of came out and made the whole paranormal thing big in the mid-2000s. And we had that idea, and we're pitching it around back in the late 90s, and nobody was interested in it because it was a little bit too fringy at the time. But it eventually found its sweet spot and took off from there. Was involved with, work was always something that was a priority. My primary job, I always had a passion for doing these other projects, and then had an opportunity when I moved out to Seattle in 2009 to work on a television pilot for a show about sustainable living called Mission Sustainable, and we put together a 44-minute pilot proof of concept and shopped that around and didn't have much success in finding the right people for that. So this was the next opportunity for me, was to work on this project. And it actually started out as me and one of the J3 Films partners, Jack Roth, planning on doing a road trip film in New Mexico. We wanted to spend some time going from different locations, UFO locations in New Mexico, and he was going to be the on-camera personality, and I was going to do all the tech stuff in the background. And as we were planning that journey, we found out about Stan's story, and that kind of came front and center for us once it was presented to us. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Well, hey, doing what you feel, doing what you believe in, and your passion is the big thing. And I've had a lot of independent filmmakers on the program, and I've been in radio for a while. I tangled with local television here, small digital station, and I'll tell you what, just trying to get some sort of programming, one show, one program off the ground, people don't realize what it takes. When we watch the big networks like NBC and CBS and ABC, what they don't realize is, or just look at a film, look at a movie, just sit there one time at the ending credits and look at how many tens of thousands of people are there.
Right.
And people just don't seem to understand what it takes and the passion that it has to make something like this. And my hat's off to you and all the filmmakers out there. It's a ton of work, and you've got to love doing it because it's late hours and it's a thankless job, and it's in most cases pretty much of a payless job too. It is. It's
you hit the nail on the head with that. But the biggest part, I think, with any film, there are people who go out there and make a film on a credit card, for $5 or $10 and it's a passion project, and they can get it out there. But the bigger issue with stuff like that is, do you have the right technical resources to make it a high quality?
Right.
So there's a lot of I don't want to discredit the independent filmmaker community, because I think even 6-second vines are pretty awesome when they're done well. So when you have people, we have so much access to the ability to create stories in a shorter time frame and do some pretty decent technical work on the post-production side, but people just learn how to use the basic tools that are now available. But I think there's a difference between something that is a hobby and then a difference when you take it to that next level and put some production values in there that require more money.
Right.
For the independent filmmaker, the hardest part of the job is really finding the path to money. And there are so many great ideas probably out there today, whether they're fiction or nonfiction, that don't get to the screen because they just can't find the right pathway. And that was part of our journey too. Our intention from the very beginning was to make a film that would be a theatrical release, whether it was for a weekend or whatever. But our intention was to make something that was something that would catch the eye of distributors and have some interest in that. But then you start to go down the pathway of all the things that have to line up for that to happen, and it really is about connections and who you know.
Right, exactly.
Because we had some insiders into Hollywood at several meetings, in LA that kind of opened our eyes to what the potential was. And the one thing that I could say early on was that there was there was more interest in Stan's story for a feature film than there was for a documentary film, in the sense that my reaction to some of the things the conversations that I was involved with and the interest that there was that they were going to do a disservice, not intentionally, but it wouldn't have served Stan's story right to have a feature film made first. It made a lot more sense to me to get his story out based on what has happened. Mm-hmm. So, the big thing about the way that we made this film is that we wanted to present something, document what has happened to him. Right. And present it in a way that would allow people to draw their own conclusions, make their own assumptions about what it was that they just saw, versus an expose or a investigative story. It was more a matter, I'm a storyteller. I'm not a ufologist. I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool field researcher when it comes to this. I saw this as a very interesting story once I was brought into it, read his book, did some research. And the deeper and deeper I got into his story, I realized that there was so much documented evidence that it was unique and it was something worth telling. So we wanted to really take the audience on a journey of tremendous amount of evidence all at once, up front, and then an emotional connection to Stan and his wife Lisa, and then validation with the experts that have been involved in this case for years.
Well, I've had the opportunity to interview them both. I've had Lisa on the show and Stan on the show, and let's talk a little bit about things. Let's kind of get into the crux of things. And I'm gonna go out a little bit on a limb. And of course, some things have happened with Stan. Some allegations have happened. And I'm not a ufologist myself by any means, John. I'm a talk show radio host. My wife and I we do this show because we want to allow people like Stan and so many others and people like you to get out there and talk about some of these fringy subjects that are a little on the edge. People are becoming, as I've said it so many times, people are becoming more and more open-minded to things and more, hey, years ago to talk about some of this stuff, they'd think you were crazy. To make a film about this stuff, they think you were crazy. But things are changing. They really and truly are. And, I just like to let people come on the show. I don't do any big fancy scripted type of thing. Just have some fun, learn some things, get some opinions. But with Stan, there's been some events, that have happened, and I just be honest with you, he has gotten kind of a negative cloud, a black cloud over his head, with some things that came out, whether they're true or not. But let's go ahead and proceed. Let's talk about Stan. How'd you meet him? And first of all, how did you find out about him?
It's an interesting the way it all happened. As I mentioned, we're working on the idea of this New Mexico film to the point where we're actually looking at RVs and ready to go on this trip. And Jack was out in Colorado for a weekend event with Stephen Greer. And while he was out at the event, this was back in the spring of 2009.
Okay.
So he was at this event, had a chance to meet with a couple of the investigators that were involved in Stan's investigation over the years. And over the course of the 3-day weekend, he got to hang out with these guys a little bit more, to the point where they went to dinner 2 nights, and on the second night they brought some of the evidence, visual evidence, images that they had and showed him, and he was blown away, primarily with some of the pictures that had been taken of the hybrid children. So he gives me a call on that second night and said, I think we found a better story to tell. So that was in May of 2009, and we didn't have a conversation with Stan until about October. But we started to do the research. We were interested in it, and at the time it was in the hands of a different production company that Jack and I were both involved with. But there was a startup in that area with another producer who was interested in the story as well. And that lasted for about a year and a half, and then it kind of fell apart as a result of not being able to find money. And Jack and I decided that we wanted, because we invested so much time, that we wanted to move forward with it. So we assumed the contract and kind of moved forward. But the first part about meeting and talking with Stan was we had to reach out and say that we heard about a story, we were interested in making a film. Mm-hmm. So the initial conversations were around, a lot of people want to make this is coming from Stan, a lot of people want to make my film, but why are you guys the right guys? Why should I talk to you? I don't even know who you are. I've never heard of you. And our whole thing was, we want to tell a story that will reach the widest audience possible, as opposed to something that would pander to the fringes and just, regurgitate your story in a way that only the people who have been following you. So we wanted to bring it to the center, take a very unusual story, something that is counterculture, a little bit unconventional, and present it in a way that would allow people in more of the center to absorb it, think about it, ponder it, have conversations, and then draw their own conclusions. So once we started talking with him about that, he was under the impression that we were looking to make a story about him, as opposed to try to present him in a certain light, put him on a pedestal or tear him apart. We just wanted to say, this is what's happened. Here's what he's documented. Here's what we've seen. We've asked the questions. It's an interesting story.
Sure.
So there are people out there who say, like, well, you didn't do the story justice because you didn't look at the other side. And I said, my response to that is, I wanted to tell a story. I didn't want to do investigative journalism piece. This is a story about a man in his journey. And are Are there bumps in the road? Yeah, there's plenty of bumps in the road, but those are well documented. And anybody who wants to go out and do a little bit of research on Stan, you just look up his name, and you'll find hundreds of thousands of hits on his name, and there's plenty of information that has been discussed over the years. But really, what we wanted to do is get people who may have never heard about his story before to connect to his story, and then let them do their own research, find out a little bit more. If they want to go and do the research and find about the current affairs, and we'll talk about those in a little bit too.
Sure.
But our whole thing initially, when we started to talk with him, it was earning trust, and there was a lot of bridge-building conversations in the first 3 or 4 months to get us to a point where he felt comfortable moving forward. And what really kind of brought it all together for us, for people who are familiar with Stan's story and some of the things that have happened, when we were engaging with him, had several Audrey calls where Audrey either came into calls that we were on or reached out directly to us to kind of introduce us, I guess, in some ways help Stan understand that we were, if you believe all of this, and I was a skeptic coming in, not a skeptic to UFOs, but until I knew more about Stan and met him in person, I didn't know. I'd read his book. I needed some validation in spending time with him to make sure that this was the right story. And some of the early phone calls were, Stan, we're interviewing you as much as you are interviewing us. We need to make a determination at the end of the day whether or not this is a film we want to put our name on. And one of the comments that I made to him early on is that, you might be a little bit wary of us, but we're also wary of you.
Now, the Audrey calls, is this the kind of computerized kind of voice type thing that he gets quite a few of? I mean, other people have claimed to gotten these too, but I mean, that's something that seems to be pretty persistent with him.
Yeah, he said it was something that happened quite a bit from, I think it was around 2004, 2005, all the way through, I think the last call was about a year ago. There hasn't been one in a while. But it started with the former head of the production company and Jack were on a call with Stan, and the voice came on and basically was saying that this is a project that you need to take the reins and run with it. It was I don't remember exactly what was said on that call. I wasn't on it, but I do recall that the message basically was, this is an important story. It needs to get out there, kind of like you have our support type of message. And after that call, Stan was kind of eased a little bit on, okay, maybe these are the right guys. And then about a week later was the kind of solidifying moment for Stan. I was on a conference call with 3 other people unrelated to this project, and I was primarily listening in on the call. So I was on my landline phone, and as I'm on this call, I'm on mute, listening in. My cell phone rings, and I look down at it, and it says that my home phone is calling me. And my home phone was the call that I was on the home phone on that conference call. So I thought that was kind of strange. I answered it. There was nothing there at all, so I hung up. 2 or 3 minutes later, the phone rang again. I stepped away from the table, answered it, said hello, and then that time I heard 3 clicks. And after the 3 clicks, it started to ring, and I just assumed that it was going to be an operator coming up, the recorded voice saying, please hang up, and, that message. But after about 3 or 4 rings, there's a voice on the other end that says, hello. And I said, hello, who is this? And he said, this is Stan. Who's this? I said, this is Jon. I said, did you call me? He goes, no, I didn't call you. You called me. And I said, no, I didn't call you. And then within the next it was probably about the next minute and a half, there was 2 other people, Patrick, who was involved in the film, and then another woman who we were working with at that time doing some development on the front end, potentially being involved in the project, was also brought into the call in the same circumstances where their phone called them, and their home phone called them, and when they answered it, they were connected to our call. So we were on the phone for about an hour, and 3 times during that call, the Audrey voice came in. The first time was about 20 minutes in. It came on and said, can you hear us? And then we all paused, acknowledged that we could, and then there was nothing. And then it came on about 10, 15 minutes later, same type of thing, and can you hear us? We just wanted to let you know that this is an important project. This project needs to move forward. Once you start moving on this film will, how you say, hit the ground running.
Right.
And so we got that kind of, and that was another endorsement. And then it came on one more time at the end. Jack wasn't on the call. He was unavailable from his phone. And the voice came on again and said, please let Jack know we're sorry that he missed the call, but please relay this information to him. It's important that he's involved as well. So all of a sudden, this consolidation of thought happened on that call. And Stan, when we were done with that call, he said, well, if you guys are good enough for Audrey, you're good enough for me. And ever since then, we've been involved in the project. Not to say that there weren't some, the first part I had mentioned was raising money, which takes a lot of time.
Sure.
And the other part was with Stan about the usage of his assets. So with him, he's very protective of his story. And his biggest fear, based on things that have been presented in the past, were that they were going to present him in a light that makes him look foolish. Not challenge him, but he's okay with that. He was more concerned about somebody trying to make him look bad. He had, the Larry King show when he was on with Jeff Peckman and showed the image, not even the alien in the window video, but just the photo. And he was, kind of skewered on that show with the guest debunkers that Larry had on. And then there was another 2020 show that was done on him where they were told up front that it was going to be a kind of a expose on what they'd been going through, but it wound up turning into a little bit of a witch hunt,
right.
And the story was negative. So he was gun shy. And he had worked with two other production companies on the documentary, and both had fallen apart. So he was very, very nervous, very, very close to the vest, and a lot of that trust-building conversation so it took about a year and a half of that, in that time frame, to get everything kind of ironed out and to a point where we could move forward with actual talking about, okay, now we can move into production discussions because all the pre-production work was behind us. But it was a long journey, and it's one that I think that most people who don't understand what sometimes has to be done when you're talking about autobiographical stories is that there's contracts involved, and that there's time frames that require a lot of back and forth, and there's money that needs to be raised. So there's been some people over the course of the last 3-4 years who have said, where the heck is this film? Why is it taking so long? So it wasn't until we've had this forum of late over the last couple of months where we've been on several radio shows and have had a chance to talk about it to help people understand that it's quite the journey to make an independent film, and especially when you're dealing with someone's story that they're so protective of it. There was a lot of delicacies in that process, but I think as we earned his trust, he allowed us more and more access to his story.
Well, it is an interesting story, and there's really, it seems like in the community, and I'm not talking about I'm not necessarily talking about a lot of the listeners, but I'm saying in the ufologist community, it seems like there's a lot of people that believe what happened has happened to him. I myself, with all the encounters he's had and interviewing him and Lisa, I believe there's truth to it. I mean, I can't see Stan making a ton of money off of this type of thing, writing a couple of books. I mean, it isn't like he's been approached, it isn't like Steven Spielberg is going to do a film about him. It seems like a guy that is, that's being quite tortured. And it sometimes it sounds so crazy, if you will, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's like, there is something here. There is something going on. There's got to be some truth to this, because it's just so, the things that have happened to this guy are so out of the norm.
Yeah, and that's one of the things and I can say this to people out in your audience who may be a little bit wary of his story, based on the handful of events that they might be exposed to. So the main things that have been, that have discredited him over the years has been primarily the way that the Boo video, the Alien in the Window video, was handled initially. First there were the images that were on Larry King, and then when the video came out, people made their own versions of it, and it turned into just ripping Stan's apart. So when people are looking for that story, they're seeing that there's all this other stuff that's lampooning it, making fun of it. So those are two things. So the lie detector test on George Norrie show that he failed, and even on Coast to Coast, they've been saying over the last several months that they can understand that if someone's on medications, it could affect the chemistry, could affect the outcome of a lie detector test. Stan, I'm sure if you talk to him, he has his own opinion on that. I'm not, defending either side. It's not the story for me to really pick a side on. What happened, and it was presented to the masses. So most people know his story for a lot of negative things, in addition to all the amazing things. But they have to dig deeper, because when you first do a search, the things that really show up more than anything are some of the ones that have got the most attention, which happen to be the controversial stuff.
Right.
So just recently, you have the Peter Maxwell Slattery show that he was on with the pen cap flipping that just went nuts earlier this year, and then the allegations that he's now facing. The timing of the interview with Peter Maxwell Slattery and the arrest couldn't have been worse for us. Because we showed the film at a film festival last fall. We were engaged in conversations with a few distribution companies out in Hollywood, and as soon as that the child pornography charges were brought up, that door just shut. That was no longer an option for us. Nobody wanted to touch that, with a 10-foot pole. So we had to go to Plan B, which was self-distribution, which is why we're doing what we're doing through the altPOV.tv. We can talk about that a little bit more. But, yeah, no, Stan's story, I think, the challenge with it is there is information out there that people, when they see it, they form an immediate opinion on him, and whether that's good or bad. So there's really not a lot of middle ground. There are people who either really support him or people who think he is a hoaxer out for fame and glory, which I can attest that that's not the case, because there is very little fame. As I'm sure you know over the years in talking with people, ufologists don't make money. They do it because they're driven to do it. They're driven to tell stories. They're driven to document what's happened for, the day that the disclosure finally comes, that it's all there. It's all there for consumption. It validates a certain part of it. I had conversations with Stan in the beginning, and he even said to me, he says, "Do you think that a documentary film will make a lot of money?" And I said, "Stan, you got to be realistic with something like this. It's a matter of," I said, if you look at box office for feature films or documentary films that are theatrical releases, I mean, the best ones, I think 4 of the top 10 are Michael Moore movies, and the top ones don't make a lot of money. Once you get down to below top 10, it's probably less than $1 million for box office. And I said, that's films, since they started documenting box office with documentaries going back to the 80s. So I said, the chances of this, you can't go into this thinking this is going to make any money at all. And one of the sobering conversations was, you do realize, Stan, that in order to make a penny on this, we have to pay off all of the expenses that were incurred to make the film first. So, if there's ever going to be a penny made, it's not going to be for a while until, there's an opportunity to... So that's one of the reasons why we've even had people ask, well, why are you charging for the films? Well, we have to pay back the money that was put into it. And we didn't have any investors. It's all loans. We did personal loans from a handful of people who were huge supporters and believed in the project, and we're thankful for that. But we have to pay their money back first and foremost, and we're putting a lot of effort into raising awareness about the story, because I believe, and the reason why I wanted to make this film from the very beginning, is that it creates a conversation. It can reach a wide audience, and it provides the opportunity for discussion, debate, awareness, continued learning, and when that conversation rises up from the shadows and into the mainstream, it accelerates knowledge across the board about every other case and every other piece of information that's out there. So it's something that's about kind of the snowball down the hill. We feel that if we put the effort to get this film out there, it can be a conversation starter.
Well, the story is just, the story is just so extraordinary to begin with. And again, all the events that surround it, and like to get into some of the details. John, we got to take a quick commercial break to help pay the light bill over here, as you know that goes.
Okay.
Our guest tonight is Jon Sumple. We're so honored to have him on the show. You can check out his website at j3films.com. We're talking about Stan Romanek and filmmaking and whatever else comes up. You're listening to Fringe Radio on KTalk, KTKK AM 630 in Salt Lake City. Of course, we're always live on the Inception Radio Network. We'll be back with John in just a few minutes. Stick around. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fringe Radio Show. Our guest tonight is Jon Sumple. John, again, thank you so much for giving us some time here on your weekend.
No problem. Pleasure to be here.
So, let me ask you, we got a bunch of questions sent in since we started here, and we'll get to those. But when you were with Stan and his family, I assume that did you spend quite a bit of time with him? I mean, did you live on at his home for a while to make this film, or was it a collection of things he had? How did you put this all together and hanging around with Stan? I mean, a lot of weird things happen.
Yeah, no, that was an important part, I think, for us, is to see the side of Stan's life, which was the everyday living part, which was to go back to what we were talking about before. It helped me realize that, as I said, I was a little bit skeptical at all the stuff that I had read in the book and, the things that I had seen on the internet. Is it possible that all this stuff was happening to him? Is it storytelling? Is it enhanced? Is it like the fish story that kind of gets out of control? But there are certain parts of it that are just hard to explain away. And it wasn't until I had a chance to spend time with him that I realized that, he is just an ordinary guy. He's like your friend, your next door neighbor, a family member. He is not he's not a weirdo. We didn't know what to expect. And our first meeting was in December of 2009. We spent 3 days with his family. And I had no idea what we were going to encounter. I'd only had probably a dozen or two phone calls with him leading up to that, but we had earned the right to the next step, which was to meet with him. And we were there for a 3-day weekend, and I was really impressed the second I walked in his front door, because we were greeted as if we were, family.
Right.
Warm, friendly people, roll out the carpet for you. Our house is your house. Enjoy your time here. Very, very friendly. And part of me, just a little bit was like, are they kind of going out of their way to make us feel, overly welcome? But I said the more and more I spent time with them, we spent another 10 days with them going over all the evidence several months later in June of 2010. And that was to me, that was sealed the deal for me. And we were still in the negotiation process and working through all of that. But when I had a chance to sit down and review everything that he had, I just couldn't believe it. So, and that's the part that I think is, if everybody could spend time with Stan the way that we have in making this film, they would realize that this is a guy who's not going out of his way to create stories. I've read debunkers who have said that the whole family's involved and there's kids on the roof with a spotlight and they orchestrate all of this. And my comment to that, after having seen everything, is why would a guy spend so much effort for 14 years to try to propagate a story that he's being constantly ridiculed for? Who would do that? That's one thing. And the other part about it is, based on the experience that I've had and the research that I've done and the evidence that I've looked at in his case, he's been monitored for 14 years. Why? What has he done that, he's an average guy? He's a blue collar, gray collar guy that does he warrant that type of monitoring if he's just a normal citizen? Probably not. So, again, spending the time, seeing the evidence, having the conversation, seeing the people that are around them, you start to realize that there is something very unusual about the experiences that he's had. And I'll be the first to say that I don't know if all of this stuff is true.
Right.
And even one of the investigators, says it on there. He said, even if 40% of Stan's evidence is true, experiences are true, it's still profound. And the one the thing that people keep going back to as kind of the sweet spot in his story are the equations. And the equations are something that are pretty profound because the experts that have been involved, Claude Swanson, who's a physicist, PhD, he said, I know Stan, I've spent a lot of time with Stan and reviewing these. I can tell you that this is not his area of expertise, and he's not good with math, and this is not something that he could do. Is he really going to try to memorize these things and draw them with his eyes closed or at night with the lights off and draw them in such perfect form? He's practicing this like he's, doing a performance? No. These are things that are happening, and when people analyze them, math is a universal language. There's no room for misinterpretation. It is what it is. What he's written and the things that have been investigated, there are interesting stories there. And one of the things that's discussed in the film is that there are alternative theories to physics. And just because what we have been taught and what we know to be true, Newtonian and Einstein physics, doesn't necessarily mean that there are alternative perspectives. And Claude goes on to talk a little bit about the fact that there are people out there for the past 100 years who've been exploring alternative physics, which are representative in Stan's equations. So it's not like Stan just made these up. It's not like he found a book and memorized and wrote them down. There has been information surrounding these theories that Stan has written in conjunction with the equations that have experts wondering if this truly is about space-time travel, about propulsion-related technologies and concepts. And those things are profound. We could do an entire documentary film just on the equations, and it would probably be a math geek's favorite film. But I don't know if we would get a lot of other people to embrace it as wholeheartedly as we would if we did a film showing a little bit of everything. But that's one of the fascinating things about his story, and one of the reasons why we were okay with distributing the film through a portal, because we shot 50 hours of footage, and we can continue to put more and more of this information out onto this website that kind of fills in some of the gaps and goes a little bit deeper into the story. So the traditional film goes out, it has its run, it kind of loses its steam and momentum and lives, with occasional views here and there, but we have the ability to keep the story going and dig a little bit deeper into a story as a result of having the ability to have it live on the web.
When you were there filming, John, did any weird things, or well, I shouldn't say weird things, but did any strange things happen? I mean, I know Lisa talks about people, entities in the home and stuff like that. Did you see anything? Kind of the opposite?
The very first day that we were there, I was. They have a split level ranch, and I was going to be staying down in the basement in one of the rooms in a converted basement. And I was walking down the steps at one point that first night. It was dark out. In the hallway that I was in, there was no windows. The doors were closed to the room. So as I was walking down the steps, I saw a flash of red light about 10, 15 feet in front of me. And it wasn't like a strobe. And it wasn't something that came from the outside. Again, there were no windows. It was like a burst of light that radiated about maybe 3 feet, about 15 feet in front of me. So it was as if it materialized right in front of me, and it was a flash. It was gone in a second. But I saw something. I paused on the stairs, and I continued to walk down. I wasn't freaking out because I know a lot more now than I did then. And so I walked down into the room, got something out of one of my bags and came back upstairs. And a little bit later on that night, I mentioned to Stan about seeing the light. I didn't say anything about it right away. And he said, "Oh, that's interesting." He said, "Because I saw some flashes down there earlier in the day, and I took some photos." So he showed me the photos, and two of the photos had shadows in between the camera and the door of the room that I went into, that I was staying in. And it was interesting because the shadow was casting a shadow on the door. So there was something there in front. And Stan said he says, "That's where I saw the flash of light." So I started taking pictures. And after he showed me that, this was probably around 11:30 at night, I'm thinking to myself, and that's the room I'm staying in? So day one, that was the first experience. And then when we were there for the week, several months later, to look over all the evidence, there were two occasions where we had water faucets turn on. Stan, Jack, and I were sitting in the family room. The kitchen is half a level up. You could see into the kitchen. There was nobody there. And all of a sudden, the water in the faucet turns on full blast. And it's not one of those, handles that you lift up that's pressure. I've done investigations before where there's pressure-related things that could cause that to happen. These are turn knobs. So how did it go from being completely off to completely full blast? There was nobody there. So that was one. And then another time we were up in one of the bedrooms, the master bedroom, and there was a bathroom off of that. It was just me, Jack, and Lisa that were working on a computer there. Same thing happened in the bathroom. Nobody else in the house. Turn handle, water goes on full blast. So Jack and I, the hair on the back of your neck stands up when something like that happens. And Stan and Lisa are like, "Oh, that's nothing. That happens all the time." Wait till you hear the knocking on the roof, or you hear the sounds outside that make you go outside, and then you hear crashes back in the house. And when you go inside, there's a chair knocked over, and there's things like that. They said this happens all the time. So we had, other than the water and the flash of light, I wouldn't say that there was anything significant. I know that when we were shooting the film, we were down in Arizona and to see one of Stan's presentations, and on a drive out to a night watch, sky watch, there was 30 or 40 people that were driving out there that all saw a UFO. We followed up about an hour later, so we missed out on that. But on the drive over, several people saw it. So that's one of the things that makes Stan's story a little bit more compelling and for people to relate to, is that when he has his experiences, he doesn't have them alone. So from his very first sighting back in 2000 to the 3 or 4 that happened right after that, there were always other people who were there and saw what he saw. So it was never a matter of him. It's not like he got abducted and showed up on a dirt road and nobody saw it, nobody experienced it. People are there with him when he's seeing things. Right. So those are the type of things that help corroborate his story a little bit, because there are witnesses there. There are other people who've seen it, and all of those things have been documented by him. And that's one of the things that I think has been fascinating about his story, is that he has done the documentation. So when you're spending the time and you're looking over all of the information that he has, you start to realize that because of the sheer volume of things that are a part of his case, you have to give it some sort of there's got to be a sliver of acceptance, even to a skeptic or a debunker, because if you see all of it, if you spend the time that we did looking at the evidence and spending the time with Stan, you realize that this is not a guy with an agenda. He's not making any money off of it. He's not. There's no ego involved in this. It is definitely something that I just can't imagine somebody wanting to perpetuate a hoax for 14 years and get slammed by it constantly. Why would anybody do that?
Well, and that's I mean that's kind of my take on it too, is that I don't see any big, these UFO conferences. I know that looking into putting one on here, John. I mean, these guys, you buy them. I don't know about Stan, but even some of the big names, you buy them an airline ticket on Southwest or the cheapest airfare and put them in a place that's not dirty, and you give them $400, and that's all they're asking for. You could probably make more at a garage sale. So I agree with you. I don't, unless I'm really missing something, and you are, and I don't think we are. I don't think there's any hidden big money agenda somewhere.
No, and I've said this before too. Is there a chance that this is all fabricated? Yeah, of course there is. Until there's the alien on the White House lawn, it's all based on faith and searching for evidence and proof and getting closer and closer and closer based on the wealth of information that's provided. But my whole part with that is that I don't believe that it's a hoax because of the time that I've spent. But if it is, it's the greatest hoax ever perpetuated on mankind because of the amount of effort that would go into something like this and the ability to keep whoever is involved quiet for 14 years to not, do something wrong.
You know what? We got a quick NBC News break. I'm not even watching my clock. John, can we keep you for another go-around?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, Jon Sumple is our guest. We're back on the other side. Stick around. KTKK AM 630. Yes, Mr. Mancini and Experiment in Terror. Our guest tonight is Jon Sumple. John, thank you so much for being here and talking about this interesting gentleman, family, and your work.
My pleasure.
So I got a couple of questions for you that the listeners sent in. You want to go over a couple of them?
Sure.
Okay. It says these are all from our friend Red over in the UK. He sent these all through for you. It says, John, what was the general vibe that you and your film crew got from Stan's immediate neighbors? Were they hostile to Stan's presence, and were they witnesses to some of the strange happenings as well?
Well, during the course of from 2000 to 2012, which was really the time period that we focused on, started out living in Denver, then lived in Nebraska, then to Colorado Springs, then back up to north of Denver, where he's currently living in Loveland, in 2 different locations there. So he's moved around quite a bit. But we did have a chance to go to where he lived in Colorado Springs and the location, obviously, where he lives now in Loveland, and talk to some of the people. And the neighbors all loved him. They understood, and it's not like Stan was running around telling people, "Hey, I'm having all these crazy experiences. I'm being abducted." He didn't promote it at all, but you kind of know that the activity is going on around you, and even some of his neighbors, they looked out for him. Right. So there were some that kept their distance, but there was never anybody, based on the people that we talked to and the conversations that we had, that were anything more than support of what he was going through. And his most recent video, I know that I think it's on his website, and it was on definitely on YouTube. He captured a video back in September, I believe, of a light going down from the sky into the woods off in the distance to the west from where he lives. And he's outside with a night vision camera, and he's running around calling his neighbors out. And they're all coming out, and you could hear it in his voice when you watch the video that he's hyperventilating. He's all not panicked, but just really excited that something's happening, and he's calling people out, and they're all coming out. You see, there's people all around him. So he's definitely not viewed as a freak neighbor by any means. They have. Again, like I said earlier, they're open door policy. Friends and family come in and out of the house as they please. They decorate their house up big for Halloween and for Christmas. So they're very good neighbors. And members of the community, and I've never experienced anything but positive feedback. But there have been some neighbors that have had some experiences as a result of being around him. There was something that happened a little over a year and a half ago, that one of the neighbors saw something, and as Stan relayed it, she was open to talking to us, but bailed when we were there. But she's a God-fearing woman, and what she saw freaked her out. She thought she saw something in Stan's backyard, and wasn't sure what it was, but she was pretty freaked out by it. Let's say that.
It seems like there's just so many strange things that happen around him. Another question for you was, this is from somebody who saw your film. It says, Jon always said that he wanted to remain detached from Stan's case, neutral, just doing it from a filmmaker's perspective. But, and I think you answered this question, but did he end up believing, in part at least, to Stan's story? And I would assume that through the things you saw, you'd have to be a believer to make the film.
Sure, and that's one of the things that I will talk about too, is that I had experiences when I was younger. I saw 3 different times I saw UFOs, and one of them I was sitting with a friend on my front porch. It was Devil's Night. I was, I think, about 11 or 12 years old, and there was a disc-shaped lit object that had red, white, and green lights on the bottom half of the saucer, like I guess if you would call it a saucer shape, but the bottom half of that saucer, and it just vertically went down in the woods, only about 500 yards from where I was sitting. So it wasn't like it was way off in the distance, a little speck of light that was moving. This was, I could see it. My friend that was sitting with me, I looked at him and I said, "Did you just see that?" And he's like, "Yeah, I saw that." He says, "What do you think that is?" I said, "I don't know, but you think it was a UFO?" And he said, "That's what I was thinking." And we got up and we ran we had some other friends that were walking around the neighborhood, and we ran to see if they saw it, and they didn't. But I remember that vividly. And there was also the 2 other times that I saw it. My dad had actually called the family outside. One of them he was grilling, and another one he was working in the yard. It was both times in the summer, and I think it was a couple of years apart. But these were the lights off in the distance that went from like east to west on the horizon, like a super high speed. So stationary from point A to point Z in a second or two across, and just stop on a dime. And it did it like 3 or 4 times. Both times they were in different areas of the sky, but both times it was similar situations where there was significant movement across the horizon in a very short amount of time, and like I said, stopping and starting, stopping on a dime and moving, accelerating immediately at a high rate of speed. And one of those 2 times, there were phone calls to the local police department where I grew up, hundreds of phone calls of people who saw the same thing. And the explanation that came out a couple of days later was that it was due to atmospheric conditions, and it was runway lights at Kennedy Airport, which it's like 75, 80 miles away. So we weren't buying that. But so I'd seen things. I'm predisposed to it. I'm not a skeptic to the idea that there's something else out there. I think we're very negligent if we start to say that we are the superior entities in the universe. I have a tendency to share stories whenever people bring that up, in the sense that we live on a planet where we're still classifying species,
right?
That we've never seen before. So it continues to happen here. Why can't we extrapolate that to our solar system, and then from our solar system to our galaxy, and from our galaxy to the universe, to say that every time you go out, there's more there? So why would we believe that we're all alone? Why would we even have that conversation? And the other part that I talk with people about is, thousands of years ago, long before Columbus, thousands of years ago, people thought that the world was flat.
Right.
But that was common knowledge based on what they knew at that time. And then in the 1400s, people thought that the Earth was the center of the solar system. Or not the solar system, but center of our everything revolved around the Earth. Right. And then when Galileo was talking about it being, we're a solar-centric solar system. It was about the sun being the center. He was jailed for that belief and ridiculed for that belief. But, and at that time frame, everybody probably thought the same thing. They were like, this guy's nuts. He's a fringe. He's way out there to think that that's the way things are. And then it's later proven that that's true. So are we really that far advanced to think that couldn't apply to us today when it pertains to the idea that there's something else out there other than us? Right. So when I think about that, I think we're really giving ourselves, one, way too much credit to think that we're the only ones out there. And two, we're being too close-minded because all we know is what we know. According to some of the equations, if you really look at the equations that Stan had, they're talking about space-time travel, about bending space-time. We're linear. We think of things as that there's no way that we can go from point A to point B because it would take light years to get there. Well, what if you could, if you took a piece of string and pulled it taut and it was, you were arm's length, from fingertip to fingertip, it was a straight line. But what if you then took those 2 points and brought those 2 points right in front of your eyes? All of a sudden, it's still the same distance, but if you could bend that, all of a sudden, it's the same distance when it's stretched out. It's hard to visualize this when it's on a phone call, but the whole idea of bending to the 2 points to a point where they're very close together. Also interdimensional travel, which we can't even begin to comprehend because we don't think that way. We don't expose ourselves to the possibility that there's another way to experience travel. So those are the type of things that, which is one of the big premises in the film, and that we ask the question at the very end is, what if this is all true? And what I want, if I could have one wish for anyone and everyone that watches the film, whether you're a believer, whether you're a debunker, whether you're undecided, is that let's just ask the question. Let's not argue points of view that it's right or that it's wrong, but what if this is all true? What if everything that Stan has experienced, and what if he is sharing, and what if the information and the message that he's presenting is something that is true? Let's have that conversation. Let's not talk about the reasons why it can't be true. Let's talk about it being true, because I think there will be a lot more awareness created and ideas, spurred from that type of a conversation versus digging your heels and defending your position. So that's one of the reasons why the film was made the way that it was to reach a wide audience. The only people who we've had any negative feedback from, of the ones that I'm aware of, are people who thought that the film was it wasn't enough about Stan's evidence. Although, if you've seen it, there's 27 minutes in the first act of nothing but evidence. But there were a few hardcore Stan fans who wanted more. And my response to that is, we've shared everything that there is. There's nothing left in the closet. The big stories are all out there. There's no smoking gun that's left behind. So we presented the story that is the big events that have happened in his life that will hopefully get people to go on that journey of discovery and asking themselves the what-if questions.
Why do you think, after spending time with him and doing this film, why do you think that Stan is the chosen one? Is there something special about Stan? Was he just an ordinary guy that got caught up in things? I mean, I've kind of, I have not read his books, but I've had the opportunity to, like say, interview him and Lisa both, pretty lengthy, and I know he doesn't have an answer. Do you have an answer? Do you have any feelings on why it may be him?
I had a conversation with him about 2 months ago. And he was saying that based on a lot of the things that he's now been going through, the stress that he's been going through has been, in some ways, even more debilitating than it's ever been. And I can imagine, he's under a pressure cooker anyway, and then to have the allegations against him only heighten that. But he was saying that he's starting to connect through this stress that he's having in these episodes and these panic attacks to things that go deeper into his past. And he said he's starting to recall things, and he wanted to have more regressions done. He said, because I'm starting to remember things, and he said it's like they're percolating up to the top, and I don't know what this all means. So he said he's starting to connect to things from his childhood. And specifically, he was saying that he's having some memories of when he was really young, of being in a kind of like a nursery. Mm-hmm. And he said that when he first started having these recollections, he shared it with his sister, who was older than him, and she said she has the same recollections of being very young and in this nursery with a bunch of other people. He said it's kind of like a very empty white room and these metal cribs or bassinets type of things. He said those were some of the things were started to come with a bunch of other kids. And he said he did have a memory of a whole bunch of military people coming to the house when his parents weren't there one night. His sister was babysitting, and when they came to the house, there was people that came through the front door. He says, I remember all these people coming in. He said, my sister, instead of staying there, she either left the house or ran and hid. And he said, I felt they were all looking at me. They were all analyzing me. They were doing, not that they were doing anything to him, but he said, I don't understand what that all is. So a lot of people in these military family scenarios, there's some connection to the military connection to the UFOs. And that's one of the things that Stan, I think, he's never come out and said it. His dad was in the military. We asked his father if he would talk to us, and he was very close, but then kind of stepped back. But there could be more to the story if we found out more about what that past connection is. But if you were to talk to Stan and Lisa and ask honestly, what's your connection to being in this situation that you're in, is that they strongly believe that they were chosen before this lifetime to be on this path, this journey together. And whether or not that was chosen by, aliens or chosen through spirit or whatever that might be, but was their intention to be on this journey. But there's a great quote in the film from Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who does hypnotherapy and works with a lot of abductees and experiencers. And he said that he asked Stan once, do you think of yourself as a messenger? And he says, no, I don't. He goes, all I'm trying to do is share things based on by me sharing, it helps me understand it. It helps me, grasp what it could be. And he said, so you don't think you're a messenger? He goes, no. He says, well, in the same way, he says, when I was a little kid, this is Leo talking, when I was a little kid, I used to deliver the newspapers. He says, I didn't know the writers. I didn't know the editors. I didn't know the publisher. But I delivered the newspapers. I was a messenger. Stan's a messenger. He doesn't have to know the whys. He's just delivering a message that will help people, recognize the fact. And as Stan said, it's really simple. The message is, the sooner we accept the fact that we're not alone, the sooner things will change. The sooner we will ascend to whatever this next level of consciousness that we're supposed to be in. And the ramifications. What are the ramifications? Think about the geopolitical ramifications. If we're a galactic, just one small factor in a galactic federation, and what happens to the economy, and what happens to all the power brokers and the control of money, and those are the type of things that when you start to really look at what the impact could be, it's a little bit daunting, but you have to start somewhere. And I think that over the last, 20 years in particular, there's been a lot more exposure. The information age is making it much more accessible for people to find the things that are out there. And one of the things that I should mention is that I really, I'm aware of what has happened from a global perspective when there's big stories out there, but I haven't done the deep dive. I hadn't done the deep dive before I got involved in this story. And when I started to do that after I read Stan's book, and there were things that were presented in there, names that I had never heard of before, so I had to go start doing this research to have a framework, the solid foundation of where Stan's stories come from. And I spent a lot of time on Project Camelot, reading and also watching a lot of videos that of the interviews that were on there, and I learned a ton. And as I kept going down those rabbit holes based on what I was learning, there's plenty of information out there. It's if people take the time to do those deep dives and to read about the corroborative stories that are opposite ends of the earth, exact same things are happening. It's pretty amazing to know that there's that much information that's available, yet we're still not to a point culturally where we're willing to accept this on the whole as being a reality.
Well, and again, it's kind of like my voyage here, John. It's about giving them, it's about being open-minded and let people ask the what-if question. Yeah, some people think we're crazy for doing this. I mean, we've been doing this show for almost 4 years. And I feel that's kind of my, I don't know about an alien calling, but I feel that it's my calling in life to do this. Before we go on with more questions, people, if they want to get your film, if our listeners want to get your film, how do they go about doing that? Because it's kind of distributed through a little different channel.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things that when we were, trying to land a traditional distribution deal, when Stan's legal issues came about, kind of shut that door. So we said, okay, what's the next best way to do this? And we wanted to distribute it, but as I mentioned earlier, we wanted it to be something that would continue the conversation, keep the dialogue going. So we developed the concept for the altPOV.tv, so altPOV.tv is a website. And the intention of the website is not just for the distribution of Stan's film, but to disseminate information about alternative points of view. That's the name of the website. So it's not just about ufology. It will also be about paranormal and conspiracy theory, and it could even be about things that are happening in the world that are fringe in the sense that people aren't aware of it, and creating storytelling that will bring it to a larger audience. So, the site launched in mid-May, so it's only a month and a half old. We're slowly gaining momentum, and our objective is to, through being on shows like this and talking about it, is get people to go to the website, see what's there, follow along all the different social media that we're plugged into, Google+, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, plus the website. So the website right now is an opportunity for people to go and either purchase a DVD or watch a video on demand of the film. They become a member of the site, and then they can have access to the film. Down the road, membership will have additional benefits. Members will be able to upload their own content and videos and images, and we'll have a member portal that allows them to do that. Eventually, we'll have the ability for chat, potentially, and forums. It's something that we also see it as an opportunity based on the journey that we've been on for other filmmakers who are looking to find a home, an audience for their film. So, as I mentioned, we've only been a month and a half, and we have almost 1,000 members on our site. So where are we going to be in 6 months, a year, 2 years from now? Hopefully in the tens of thousands, and it would be awesome to be able to say to an independent filmmaker on a fringe subject to say, would you like to have an audience of tens of thousands of people potentially see your film? So one of our goals, based on the journey that we've been on, is to provide that channel, that pathway to audiences who are interested in that content. So we have the grand vision of seeing other filmmakers find a home on this website, of hosting online film festivals that will allow people to connect to the content in a big way. So we're starting out slow with Stan's story. We have more content that we're going to put on the site that's specific to Stan's story. In particular, one of the things that we did was we filmed a regression. It's about 2.5 hours long, and we'll have that up on the website probably later this summer. So we'll have more content. There's tons of little stories that we'll be able to put out onto the website over the course of the next several months, and we're looking forward to being a portal and an education resource for people who are interested in the subject matter. So the film is available at altPOV.tv, and I encourage people to follow along on Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr as well.
And can they also get it through your J3 Film site as well, John?
No, the J3 Film site is a production company, and we've kept the two separated primarily because the J3 Films, we may be doing films, and we will be doing films down the road that have nothing to do with paranormal or ufology or things of that nature. We have a couple of things that we're looking at that are completely unrelated, and we just want to keep the two entities kind of separate. One is more a production company. The other one is more of a distribution channel for content.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would love to see your TV channel. I mean, a place where all this stuff can come together. And I'm working with a couple of young filmmaker, actually two of them. We've had them on the show a couple of times that are they're out filming right now, taking paranormal investigations from a different standpoint. The guy is a musician, unbelievable musician, writes his own stuff, performs his own stuff, does unbelievable videos and stuff like that, and he's putting stuff together, I think, that's better than Ghost Adventures or any of this other reality stuff we're seeing. But just like you said, trying to get a break, trying to get his foot in the door, or even get a few bucks. These guys are starting to realize doing it on their own. They're like, well, we'll go shoot 12 episodes. Well, they shot one episode, and it cost them a fortune, and they did all the work themselves.
Well, here's the beauty of what we're doing, and if you look at the content world right now, you look at the experience. I was listening to one of your shows, the filmmaker that did the Brown Mountain. In North Carolina, and he was talking about, it costs the same amount of money to go and see Paranormal Experience for that was made for $15,000 as it is to see Avatar, which was made for $250 million, which is true. But what's happening in the world of content right now, and the younger generations have embraced this, and one of the things that we're kind of surprised by is that so far the audience, according to our Google Analytics, is trending young. I was expecting kind of the 30 to 40 demographic to be our sweet spot. It's the 18 to 34, which is where we have our biggest numbers, huge numbers. It's 60% of our audience falls into that category, which I was really, really surprised by. But these are the people who are consuming content. The younger generations are looking for content on handheld devices, on the internet. They're not looking for traditional channels. And you'll see more and more films now that are independent films or small distribution company films that are being released theatrically at the same time that they're available as video on demand, which is very unusual. When you think about the traditional model, it was all about being released in a theater first. And you go back. I was reading a great article about Jaws and how Jaws kind of changed the game. It was the very first blockbuster film, and the way that films used to be released back in before Jaws came out was they used to be released in small releases. So they would be released in New York, L.A., and Chicago, and if they got an audience, then they would slowly expand across the United States. And it could take months before it got to a small town, a release that was a brand new film, until Spielberg's came out, and it went to a whopping 400-plus theaters, which was unheard of at the time. And now we're talking about films that are released in the 4,000 screens on a release. So the whole idea, just going back 30, 40 years, is that it's changed, and it's changing again. So people are looking for content that they're interested in, as opposed to what the film or the distribution companies want them to see. So they're seeking out that type of content. And I talked to some people, and I'd love to talk to the folks that and that you've been working with about that whole idea of, well, what if we can find a way to do it and deliver it in a raw format, not in a low production quality, but in a raw, gritty format that allows people to consume it as they want to. And a lot of it is about information. There's one person who's very well known internationally in ufology. I'm not going to mention her name, but she's very well known, and she has tons and tons of content that she has captured over the years, but it doesn't live anywhere. And I've said to her, one of the things that we can do on this portal is we can take this content that you've captured over the last decade, and we can say, okay, since these are great stories, why don't we just put together, an annual series, and it'll be like they're doing on Netflix. We'll put 12 of them together and put them all out at one time. And all it's going to take is to have you introduce it, you wrap it up, and then you just have the interviews, because people want information. Right. So these are the type of opportunities to say, okay, here, now you can see this series, on this website, and we charge, a couple of bucks to see each episode, and people are going to consume that. People are preconditioned now to spend $5 or $6 online to watch a film. It's convenient.
Well, and I think that it's kind of delving a little bit into the world of the independent filmmaker, John. There's a lot of technology out there. I know there's kind of the tried and true and the blue filmmakers that, not that many years ago had to go out. They spent tens upon tens of thousands of dollars for camera equipment. Now you can take a $200-300 a tablet with an unbelievable movie camera built into it and shoot a film that actually looks pretty doggone good with a free editor, with an editor type app. And I know while that disturbs some of the old timers, if you will, or the people that have been in it for a while, I still think it's a good thing because it's letting talented people move forward. And like on YouTube, there's now series on YouTube. I mean, people are making, things are changing, and again, it doesn't have to come through Warner Brothers or Paramount. I mean, the big buck pictures are cool, but there's so much raw talent out there that will never make it to the big screen on a Paramount film, but yet could be just as good done on the small screen or on your computer right in front of you.
Well, and what I think is happening, too, is if you look at the music industry and what's happened as a result of primarily Apple and iPod and iTunes, the availability of content, and, it's being available in Napster, creating the opportunity for people to basically consume music whenever they want it and find it whenever they want it. So it would, go back a dozen years ago, and the way that musicians made money was selling CDs and albums. That was how they made their money. Now that's not how they make their money. They make their money by touring.
Right.
Because it's almost like give the music away for free and come and see us play live, and that's why we're charging, $75 and $40 for a T-shirt, because that's where they're making their money. The same thing is starting to happen where you see the big blockbuster films and the mega superstars who are bankable. They're not as bankable as they used to be. There's really no mega superstar in the way that there used to be. And I think one of the reasons why is because people are accessing film in a way that they never have before. The numbers are still big because the cost of ticket prices continue to go up. And one of the things that if you look at the numbers in box office enough to say, okay, if a film is coming out in 3D and they're charging $15 to watch that 3D film, a big portion of the box office gate is coming from a higher ticket price. If you go just based on the number of people attending a film, the numbers are lower now than they used to be because people are consuming content on their handhelds, on their tablets, and on their personal computers versus always going to the theater. So there is a shift. So I think that there, for filmmakers who are recognizing, or storytellers who are recognizing that there is an audience out there that is completely content sitting in their sweatpants and a T-shirt on a Saturday night and consuming a film versus, driving to the theater and spending $40 for tickets and food. They're content to consume it. I never thought that I would see people watching movies on a smartphone.
Right.
But I see it all the time now. It just blows my mind. To me, a movie is to be experienced in a big theater. That's my mindset, is that there's certain films I want that theater experience. But people are now consuming them in ways that we never thought that they would, and they're willing to spend, $4 or $5 on a digital download to watch it on their phone.
Yeah, it's amazing, man.
It is. It's a shift, and it's going to be interesting to see where it's going to be in the next 5 years. I just love the idea of younger people who are more technically grown up in more of a technical world. They don't think twice about learning a new computer program when they're 12, 13 years old. So you have musicians who are making their own music when they're teenagers and making films when they're teenagers that would have never had the access to those tools 20 years ago because they just didn't exist. They weren't consumable. They were big-ticket expenses. Now anybody can do it. And that doesn't make everybody a filmmaker or a musician or a storyteller, but if they do it and they learn the craft and they learn how to tell a story and they're presenting content that people want to see, then you're going to see more and more independent films be distributed through channels like this versus traditional distributors. And the other thing about a big part about that is that you spend all your money to make something, and then you get to the traditional distribution, it's an 80-20 split in favor of the distributor.
Right.
And then it's usually a net deal, so net profit. So they could bury costs for years, and you won't see a penny until 4 or 5 years down the road when they finally say that it's broke even, and now anything that comes in, there's money there. I've talked with people who had films in Hollywood that have, they weren't huge budget films. They were, $500,000 to $1 million films, but once they got to the distribution channel, they haven't seen a penny.
Exactly.
And it's in the favor of it's always been in the favor of the distributor. There's new models coming out now where you have to, if you're willing to take on a little bit more of the promotion of the film, it could be a 50-50 split, but then you're also putting more money into it up front. So it's the traditional route is an expensive one. So for the gonzo filmmaker and the ones who have great stories to tell, I think it could be a great resource to have portals like altPOV.tv as a distribution point. Instead of, because the beauty of that is that over time we're going to have the tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of followers. And when you have filmmakers that make a film, we can just say to them, here, we have 10,000 people, we have 50,000, we have 200,000 people. They will be interested in your story. Are you interested in having it distributed through us? And create a win-win for the filmmaker, because if you try to do it on your own, it's very hard.
Yeah.
As people will learn if they go through we had people telling us, well, just put it out on YouTube for free and you make a ton of money. Well, that's not how YouTube works. Right. People are like, well, there's people making so much money. It's the value is there, but they're not necessarily recognized as money. And you're talking about, people with hundreds of millions of hits that are making money. They're valued and making money. So this is more about a channel that provides people an opportunity for focused content that has an altruistic intention behind it. I don't want an advance. My vision for this was never to advance an agenda. It was to present an alternative in a way that gets the masses to think about, I wonder what if this is true? What if there's something here? As opposed to someone making a film, whether it's on the right or the left, to say that it's an extreme agenda and they're trying to force that agenda to their audience. I'm not interested in that type of content. We want content that's going to help people raise their level of awareness to the point where they can make decisions that could have an impact on where we go as humanity.
Well, and I think the other thing is if you can put more, with your new project here, the more fringy stuff, the more alternative stuff, the more different stuff you can put out there, you'll draw the crowd. I mean, the crowd. Uh-huh. You build it and they will come. I mean, people are really drawn to this. A couple questions that came in. Let me run a couple by, if you don't mind switching back a little bit to Stan's thing. It says, during the making of the documentary, the witnesses mentioned, including Alejandro Rojas, how they were blown away by a photo that Stan had taken of a hybrid, but before he could get it logged into his PC, the photo vanished. Did you, Jon, see that photo yourself?
No, I did not. That happened before we got involved in his case. I think it was probably only 6 months prior to that, if that much. But there was I think 17 people that were at his house the night that happened, and all 17 of the people at that event saw the image, and each one of them, the people that were, Alejandro was there, Stan and Lisa, obviously. And Claude, who's also, so Alejandro and Claude were both in the film, and Claude, even though we didn't put this in the film, when I talked to him about it and we interviewed him, he said it was a very emotional, and Rick Nelson was also there, who was in the film. It was it was one of those films, or one of those images that when you see it, it's an emotional event. And Claude said he was brought to tears when he saw it, because he was like, this is profound. And then in a matter of minutes, when Stan walked downstairs to go and load it on his computer, his camera beeped and the image was gone. But the people saw the people saw it.
Yeah. Well, I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of very respected ufologists, Grant Cameron being one of them. Actually, here he's been in the studio a couple of times and met him in person, and I really respect Grant. And we talked a little bit about Stan, and he just said, and Grant is so matter of fact, but he's just like, there is just so much strange stuff that happens around this guy. You just cannot believe it, and people won't believe it unless they're right there with him.
Right.
And
I agree.
And these
that's why I wish he could invite people. I mean, the greatest skeptics in the world and debunkers to spend a week with him.
Yeah.
And I understand that there's some pretense that would come with that, is that, oh, he's putting on airs. But we spent time with him that 10-day period that we were we poured over every piece of evidence. I watched every video that he had. I watched all of his regressions. And while I was there one night, it was probably 1 o'clock in the morning, and Stan said, I really hate watching and he would get up when we were watching the regressions. He says, because I don't remember. And he goes, and that doesn't sound like me. It doesn't look like me. He says, it kind of weirds me out. And he said, now after you've seen all this, he goes, do you think I'm crazy? And this was a really raw, vulnerable moment. He was saying, do you think I'm nuts? And I said, Stan, based on what I've seen here, I said, it's profound in the sense that there's so much of it. So do I think you're nuts? No, I don't. And he said, well, there's times, and he goes, I'm sure you could understand why. He says that I feel like I don't know if my life is real. Is it not real? Should I believe everything that's happened? He says it's just very confusing at times. And he even said, and he got emotional too. And he said, and I have to admit that it still scares me. It scares me in the sense that I don't understand why this is all happening, why it's happened to me, why it continues to happen, and why I'm the person that was chosen for whatever reason. But I'll also say at the same time, there's hundreds of people just like me out there, all over the world that are doing the same thing. And we had a chance to interview. One of the things we do on altPOV.tv is we have a radio we call altPOV.radio. It's a podcast, and one of the first person we interviewed was Peter Maxwell Slattery, who's from Australia and has had very similar experiences to Stan. I've watched Peter's regression video, and what happens in his regression video is identical, and I'm not kidding, identical to what happens with Stan, as far as being channeled and the way that his head moves, the way that he talks, the way information is digested and shared, and there's the struggle to communicate. It is identical. It's scarily identical that here we are, opposite ends of the world, same type of experiences happening. So there's hundreds of people out there that are having similar experiences, and hopefully, with films like this and other films out there, that I think this film is just as important for people who are on the journey for awareness and want to know more and are opening their eyes as a result of seeing something like this. But I also think it's just as important for experiences to see this, the ones who don't want to talk about it, who aren't comfortable sharing the way that Stan has. And when they see a movie like this, it validates their experiences. They feel better that they're not crazy. So we've had a handful of people who have echoed that to us, is thank you so much for making this film. It has made my life more easier to comprehend that, I'm not alone. Right. And I've had 2 or 3 people who said, I want to talk to you, but I don't want to share my story. Because they're feeling like I now have a voice, I now have a channel to talk about this in ways that I never could before. And I wasn't expecting that when we made the film, but I now realize that there is a significant opportunity here for people to watch this film and say, I'm normal, I'm like Stan, I'm not crazy, I feel better, right, knowing that I'm not alone and having experiences like this.
Do you know... And we don't need to get into it too much, but is with his legal stuff, does it look like he's going to come out okay on this deal, or is it pending? Or
well, I was surprised, just like everybody else, and it was specifically difficult for us because he had the search warrant was April of last year. And we didn't know anything about it. They didn't share it. And rightfully so, they didn't, because they were instructed by their attorney, why would you want to start talking about something until you're charged. Don't even bring it up. Don't talk to anybody about this, because otherwise, if you start to talk about it, you're propagating a story that has no value yet because you haven't been charged anything. So don't bring a negative to you until it's brought to you. So I understand why, but when I heard about it, I called up Lisa right away. I saw something on Facebook. She didn't say what it was, but she said, when you see this, you'll understand. You'll have a better idea that this is not true. So I went and looked, and I saw the story, and my heart sank. And it was primarily, selfishly, that the timing couldn't have been worse because of all the work that we had done to get the film to a point where we were going to hopefully find a fit in Hollywood. But at the same time, I realized that it's more about the message, and how the message gets out there is the most important thing. So when I had the first conversation with Lisa, and Stan, and they both apologized that they couldn't share anything with us, and I understood why once they shared, what their attorneys had said to them. But in talking with both of them, Stan had said, absolutely, positively, under no circumstances whatsoever will I cop any sort of plea deal. He said, I am not guilty. I am not going to do anything that will give anybody the benefit of saying that they broke me, or he says, I didn't do this. I am not guilty. So he is adamant, and I've spoken to him only 2 or 3 times since it's happened, and every time I've talked to him, he said the same thing. And I've even asked him, because it was right around the time that we were launching the film, he was supposed to have a court appearance, and I said, Stan, there's not going to be any surprises, are there?
Right,
he said,
right.
No, there's no surprises, John. He goes, I will not admit guilt for something that I didn't do. He goes, we will take this as far as we humanly can, and he said, I'll bring my whole story into the courtroom, because I will validate that I've been monitored, and I have the evidence, I have the reports, he documents everything. So that from that point of view, what he's sharing with me, both he and Lisa, is that they're in it for the long haul. They're going to fight this as tooth and nail, and he will not admit guilt, because he believes strongly that he was set up.
Yeah. I hope for his sake and his family, and I mean, again, people can get caught up in it, and it was kind of again, the bunkers, the anti-Stan people, when that hit, it hit with a vengeance. It was like, yes, but and who knows, at the end of the day, I guess everybody has to dig through everything and find out what's really what. But a horrific thing to have happen to any of us. Something.
Well, we had to address it in the film because of the timing of it, and we didn't recut the film. There was actually a conversation at one point because the advisors that we had said your only opportunity to get the film out is to recut it and address that the government's out to get them. The conspiracy theory approach is that, and then kind of focus on, we focused on from 2000 till 2012, and this would flip the story to present day, and then reflecting back on how we got to present day. And I just felt like it's a whole different story. I said, what happened between 2000 and 2012 is still valid, regardless of the situation that's going on with Stan today. So I think it's still important to tell the story. Whether he's guilty or innocent, what happened to him, and it's still a valid documentation of those experiences and the evidence that he's documented over the years. So I think it's what's happening now is another story. It's another part of his journey that if someone really wanted to dig deep and do an investigative thing, they may wind up in a ditch somewhere, but it's a whole different story. And I didn't think it served the purpose of trying to reach a wide audience to open people's eyes about the experiences versus making it into a conspiracy theory type of story. So we walked away from that, didn't want to do that, and that kind of sealed our fate to self-distribution of the film.
Very true, very true. Any other projects coming up for you, John, in the not-too-distant future?
Well, we're spending. It's another learning lesson too, is to launch a expansive website to distribute a film through is a big endeavor, because we're not just looking at it as a distribution point like most films do, but it's taken up a lot of time, and learned an awful lot about integration in PayPal, which can be very evil in its integration. Not that they're evil people, but the process is evil to try to get it to the point where it works the way that you want it to. So we've had a lot of learning lessons there, but there are a couple of other things. I mean, I've got tons of ideas for other documentary films, and I'll even mention one now that, you know, may ruffle some feathers, but I would love to do a film between now and the next general election that focuses on the whole issue of the founding fathers in our Christian beliefs, and that this country was built on Christian beliefs. I've done the research, and there's plenty of research out there that indicates that that is the furthest thing from the truth, but yet it's a story that continually is brought to the attention of extreme right-wing people, is that we are a Christian nation. And all you have to do is look at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution to realize that that was never the intention, that we were a free country. And we have different, and it's not meant to be an attack. It wouldn't be presented as an attack. It would be presented as an education that's not necessarily true. So that's one of the projects that's kind of percolating on the front burner that we're looking into. But right now, I would say probably 90% of our energy goes into getting the word out that this film is available, because we really feel that more and more people see this, more and more conversations happen, and awareness goes to a whole new level.
Well, I wish you the best success, and again, I want to thank you so much for being here. Why don't you throw out the website one more time, Jon, and so our listeners can go ahead and take a look at this film.
Sure. It's altPOV.tv. And on that website, we have not only we have some clips from other things. We have the radio broadcasts and podcasts that can be downloaded. The film is available for DVD purchase or video on demand. It's a 48-hour rental. You can watch as many times as you want in 48 hours. And what we're going to expand the site to turn it into a community and create an opportunity for people to raise their level of awareness if they so choose. And that's the beauty of it too, is that, you know, the story of Stan's regressions and where that goes and the information that's shared is pretty intense. And we didn't feel it was right to really include too much of that in the film, because it would be like going from basic arithmetic to algebra to calculus in 48 hours. And we want to appeal to the center, let them consume it, understand it, do their own research, and what comes up next on the website could be something that they're interested in diving a little bit deeper. So our intention is to continue the story, you know, share more information on a variety of different levels to continue the expansion and education process for people who choose to. So we're excited about where it could go.
Sounds good. Jon, thank you so much again. Have a great weekend. Take care, and happy 4th of July next weekend. We'll stay in touch.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you having me on the show.
It was an honor having you here, Jon. Take care.
Okay, thanks a lot. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.